All right, everyone. So today we're going to be saving your college application because you're probably falling into the trap of either diminishing returns or even in some cases negative returns on your college application. Now, I'm sure we've all heard of diminishing returns where you're putting in more effort, but the results and output that you get are actually decreasing. Now, the thing here is that sometimes your effort that you put into your college application can actually backfire, which leads to more stress and poorer performance. And that obviously snowballs to less motivation. It hurts your mental health and steals your energy. So we don't want that. And that's why today we'll be diving into the problem behind that, how to solve it with actionable steps. And yeah, let's get right into it. So first off, there's actually different buckets of returns, right? So there's not just diminishing returns, but there is productive returns, diminishing returns, and negative returns. So productive returns, pretty self-explanatory, is where the time you put in actually gives you the results that you want. The diminishing returns is where you're putting in time and you're getting something out of it, right? But it's decreasing. And negative returns is where we start putting in time that can actually start hurting. So now let's look at some of the specific ways that productive, diminishing, and negative returns actually affects your application in different ways, starting with standardized testing, right? So the productive returns here is where you're learning the most effective test taking strategies and studying the concepts that are actually going to boost your score. Diminishing returns is where maybe now you're focusing on the nitpicking details of concepts like vocabulary, which is very difficult to really hone in on to increase your SAT or ACT score. And then your negative returns here is where you're just overstudying, right? So you're trying to get the last 10, 20 points, which really is not worth your time. And that can lead to burnout and even declining scores, right? So that can really hurt your confidence and the other parts of your application. Now for extracurriculars, right? We want to talk about productive returns is where you start launching that meaningful project and pursue it long term. You achieve those early successes with metrics and yada yada yada. So the diminishing returns is where you start looking at the smaller details again, right? So you're spending hours trying to perfect the aesthetics of your website or trying to get extra 50 followers on social media. Is just really not going to be that helpful. Negative returns is where you start to branch out, right? Expanding your scope into other things that might not be out of your expertise. That can lead to frustration and thus also imposter syndrome, right? So if you have a focused goal on your extracurricular, then don't try and branch out and accomplish a bunch of other things. That is not going to be useful for you. Now here is a useful tip is where if you're looking to write the extracurricular descriptions, this is very useful. Marketing is probably one of the biggest things on the college application. So putting the time in to write the best extracurricular descriptions that are powerful and really represent the impact that you've had is super important for your application. So we've made a video on that. Make sure you check it out if you're interested. Now let's talk about your essays, right? So developing that first strong draft with good structure and ideas is productive. Diminishing returns is where you start looking at the grammar. Grammar is important, but if you're looking at, does this word make it better? Yada yada, so that is where it starts diminishing. Negative returns is where if you're receiving conflicting feedback, one person says, oh, your essays are great. Another person says, this essay is horrible, scrap it. That's where you're really going to get conflicted and really hurt your application. Now from choosing schools, right? So if you have a balanced list, this is what you really want, right? I know there's a lot of things online of people just applying to reaches, but usually you want to have a balanced school list. The diminishing returns here is where you're like, okay, let me add a couple more schools. And then you realize, oh shoot, there is a bunch of extra random supplemental essays after, right? So that just adds to the workload. Negative returns is where you start really getting stressed out, right? Because you have classwork, right? Just from your regular schoolwork. And then you have the SAT maybe you have to study for or something. Now you have to write all these essays, write extracurricular descriptions, and continue your involvement in extracurriculars. It's all just a lot. And so the solution here is the 80-20 rule. You've probably heard of it, but it's basically where you want 80% of your results come from 20% of your efforts, right? So 20% of your efforts here is where you want to really maximize your time. And to maximize your time, here's how you can do it. Number one is you're going to set a specific time limit for each task, right? Because you don't want to be sort of like doom scrolling. So if you're on your phone and you're scrolling through TikTok or Instagram or anything, right? That is really sort of the same behavior you might have if you're working on your college application without a clear set goal. You need a goal and you need time and you need urgency. Otherwise, you're going to be sitting there thinking, trying to go through that process and just waste a bunch of time. This is a really useful diagram right here. You can see that if you have your urgent tasks, non-urgent tasks, split them up, right? So if it's something important, do it now. And if it's something that is not completely urgent, but you know is very important, write down a specific time and location that you're going to complete that task. Now, if the things are not important, things you want to delegate, maybe that's getting feedback on an essay, or maybe if it's something for your extracurricular, to delegate that specific task to a officer, co-member, or something like that. And if it's something that's just not important at all, so take the SAT, for example, getting the extra 10, 20 points, not important, delete it. That is not worth your time at all. Number 2 is establish a cutoff for feedback. So this applies to your essays. You need to limit the number of people that you ask for feedback because people are going to give you conflicting ideas, like I said before. Now, you also want to set deadlines and restrictions, right? Past a certain point, you don't want to keep getting revisions and feedback because at a certain point, you need to finalize everything. And the more feedback you get, the more conflicting ideas you get, and then you can have a lot of doubt, right? Doubt is never good because you want to be confident in what you're putting out there as the final product. And so sometimes you just need time on your own to finalize everything and get it together. Number 3 is to create a visual application tracker, right? So you want just a spreadsheet or something to visualize your progress. This goes hand in hand with number 1. And these visual cues will help you stay accountable and on task to really accomplish the key parts of what you need for the 80-20 rule, right? So 20% of your efforts give you 80% of those results. And you really need to focus on all those parts, whether that be your extracurriculars, essays, test scores, application, before worrying about the last 20%, which is not going to help at all. So yeah, guys, that does it for the video. If that helped, make sure you subscribe to the channel and check out our other college admissions videos. And yeah, that does it for the video, and thank you for watching.